Okay, and evening. Welcome to the first of our Ask the Farmer Q&A sessions for 2021. Happy New Year, everyone. My name is Brigid and I manage the Farming for Nature project. So each Monday for the next couple of months, we have farming ambassadors joining us. So Farming for Nature set up to encourage and inspire farmers to farm more with nature in mind. And in order to do this, we find exemplary farmers each year to join our network. And these are called Farming for Nature ambassadors. And this Q&A session is a great way to hear from our ambassadors and ask their questions and find out their tried and tested methods for farming on their land. So we are delighted tonight to be joined by Clare farmer Fergal Smith. So the outline of tonight is I'll just ask Fergal a few questions for about 20 minutes or so just to kickstart the event. And then I encourage anyone who has any questions for Fergal to put them in the chat box. I've already received quite a lot of questions over email, so I'll try and get to as many of these as possible. But it looks like it's a very popular session, so we'll try to get to as much as possible. So on to tonight's session. We are joined by Farming for Nature, Clare farmer Fergal Smith. Fergal is one of the drivers behind the Moy Hill Community Farm. This is a 66-acre regenerative agricultural farm, and their main enterprise being 2 big market gardens and a small flurd that includes cows, sheep, turkeys, and pigs. They follow the holistic management systems with a keen focus on community engagement and education. Fergal, welcome, and thank you for joining us this evening.
Thanks, Bridget. Thanks for having us.
Yeah. So, Fergal, I might just start with you might just let me know how you kind of came into agriculture and especially into this farm.
Okay, so I'm actually, it's funny to say in a Clare farmer, I still think of myself as a Mayo man, so it's interesting when you say Clare farmer. But yeah, so I grew up in Mayo. My dad is still a market gardener on a 1-acre plot. So yeah, that was our childhood. Market gardening, 7 days a week. He started the country markets up in Westport, and yeah, I loved it. I remember 4 years of age saying that's all I wanted to do, and yeah, kind of realized then a lot later on that that's what I really wanted to do. But yeah, so I was always interested in helping my dad, but I was also running off away from my dad's farm a lot and going to all the neighbors' farms and running around with the animals, because I always found the animals a lot more, yeah, exciting to be around, and there's more kind of action going on than just the rows of vegetables. But vegetables would be and are still my bread and butter, kind of what I know inside out. And I kind of feel like vegetables, you kind of have to have them and get them right, because we eat them predominantly most days of the week. And yeah, the animals are the fun and exciting bit of farming. So when I came back, so I went off, I left home, went traveling, went around the world, and had the kind of rude awakening of, oh, what am I actually going to do when I kind of stop and settle down and this kind of thing. And yeah, it kind of was very clear that it was farming that I wanted to do. But I didn't want to just become the 1-acre market garden that my parents did. I was like, okay, I'll do that because I know vegetables are very important, but I want to have the whole farm, the mixed farm with, yeah, as many animals that suit the landscape, and really on an emphasis on what's the best impact I can make for the environment. You know, it wasn't like my dad did it as a necessity, as a job. He was an engineer actually, no farming background, but he moved to the west of Ireland. There's no engineering job, so he was providing an income for our family. So it was very much, you know, doing it as a job. Whereas I suppose I'm the Celtic Tiger kids, where we're very privileged and didn't have the same hardship maybe as our parents' generation. But it's allowed me to go back into farming with a bit more of a, yeah, a nature focused interest. I really wanted to do the biggest impact while I was farming. Like, it's not just about a business now. It has to be a business, obviously, and pay its way. But I wanted to, yeah, you know, build soil, create biodiversity, you know, see more wildlife through the farming. And the more and more I looked into that,
do it here, Brian.
I realized it wasn't from it wasn't going to be from vegetables. It's going to be from animals and integrating trees. So that's kind of what I've been working towards since I stopped traveling, and I worked my way up. You know, not being from Clare, and it's, you know, it's a tricky country to acquire land in, especially when you're young and you have very little money. So I kind of worked our way up from a half-acre little garden to 1 acre. To then we got 17 acres, and then we, about 4 years ago, got another 60 acres. We sold 10 of those to a couple of neighbors to kind of keep the peace, because we're not from the area, and buying 60 acres was a bit of a, you know, a shock to the community. So we bought it, and then we sold 3 different parcels back. And yeah, so it's been a progression to get here. And yeah, it's taken about 8 years now to get to this point, and it's, you know, it's only now starting to, you know, materialize into what I've always kind of wanted to happen. And, you know, I'll say now to everyone, listen, I am no expert. I'm really at the early stages of this whole process, and, you know, I've done a lot of learning in my head and books and online and all this kind of stuff, but the practice is still in its early days. And I'm hell bent on doing it, and I'm not gonna stop doing it until I really, you know, learn how to make it work and create a working example. But it's still in its infancy, really.
Okay, just really quickly there, Fergal, a lot of people have just said there, I can hear you perfectly, but a lot of people are saying that they can't hear the volume. Now, I'm just going to say to everyone, obviously turn up your volumes at home, but if there's any way you can turn up your volume, for me, it seems to be working fine. Sorry about this.
I have something here. I want to go up.
And maybe you just have to actually even just be a bit closer to the, just get that. Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
So just that's great. The kind of the farm, you might just tell us about the farming system then that you have in Moy Hill. So what's it consist of now that you have these? It's 66 acres, isn't it?
Yeah. So I would say 66 acres, probably only 35 or 40 acres of kind of usable kind of grazing land. A lot of it, there's about 12 acres of kind of essentially bog, kind of heathen bog, very shallow bog, and quite a bit of trees. But yeah, so everything we're doing really is trying to regenerate soil, or, you know, all the different terms there is out there. But I like the regenerative word because I want it to be year on year getting better. That's so in our market gardening, which is very much a man-made environment, it's still regenerative, even though it's got a lot of inputs. Every year on year, it's getting better. We don't till. It's a no-dig garden. Huge amounts of inputs of compost on the surface, covering the ground with either cover crops or with tarps. So, you know, everything. And then if you go into the poultry with the turkeys, you know, we move them every 2 days. They're never standing in wet ground. We keep them moving. Same with all the animals, just keep moving. That's basically the aim of the game. So it's all about how we don't degrade land. How do we always make an impact, and afterwards it's going to get better. Because a lot of farming is making an impact and then it's getting degraded. So yeah, that's basically it.
And on that, regenerative farming, I know that you follow holistic management as a system. Would you like to explain that to us and what that looks like?
Yeah, so I don't know what it was. So 6 years ago, I came across it, and I did a course in Cork. Actually, it was first, and yeah, it kind of these are principles that I had about making the land better. Basically, the lovely thing that holistic management, or Alan Savory, has done is he's given farmers, and it's not even for farming, essentially, it can be for anything, but it's a framework. It's a decision-making framework, and it's very simple, really, and a lot of it's kind of common sense, and you can say, oh, sure, I know that anyway, but it actually lays it out on paper, and it gives you something to follow. Whereas like they've done surveys, but 90% of farmers do not have a plan. Like, they go round and round each season, just, from kind of routines and tradition. Whereas this is breaking down your management into how am I making sure I'm going to have enough rest on my land? How am I going to make sure I have enough money in the bank? It's actually giving you a bit of kind of a handrail while you're going through farming. So it's very simple, but then it's managing something very complex, and it's in a simple way. So it helps the complexity of farming, which is so variable. So yeah, it's great. And anytime we've had the training here quite a few times, and yeah, anytime they're around, it just reminds me how important it is to have your plan. Like, really stick to. It's like you make the best plan, but no one is going to make the right plan. That's the main humbling thing you'll realize. You'll never make the right plan, as clever as you think you might are. But you make a plan, and then you start and you follow the plan, and what you're doing is you're straight away monitoring. And that's the biggest skill that every farmer has, or anyone out on the land, is they can monitor on how the environment is it reacts from your actions. And as you see the reaction, as in more birds turn up or bare soil turns up, you can say the plan's going well or it's not going well. And how I can, every time, whatever you see, if it's good or bad, you can see, oh, now I know how to make it better. So by the monitoring, you're getting your information, and then you replan. And that's the loop. You just keep going round and round. And it is simple, but it is, and I think it's important for us in managing such complex systems to have something to guide us, because you can almost see something so often that you don't even notice that it's going wrong, or you can see it's going wrong, and then without having a little bit of a system to make the adjustments, you kind of you can feel bad, you made a mistake, and then that's it. Whereas this is giving you, like, progression, how to make it better each time. And the thing is, you are going to mess up, and you're going to have loads of failures, and that's a given. Like, there's no way around that. And all you have to do is just constantly monitor, see the result, and then replan for the next time, and you will get there. Everyone will get there, as long as you have that. The biggest thing you learn in the holistic management, which is nothing to do with farming or anything, is what is the line, is you got to assume you're going to be wrong. And once you can realize you're going to be wrong, you've got half a chance. And that was great, because I think our kind of more Western thinking or educated thinking is getting the right technology or the right idea, and then we just drive it home. Like, we want to prove our point for as long as we can. Whereas, why don't we just accept we could be wrong, and go in accepting we probably haven't got this right, but if we're willing to accept that, we could, we can then adjust it. And there's no problem being wrong. You just have to, deal with it. And holistic management is really good for that. Really,
brilliant.
Really
I think the nice thing about monitoring as well is you can see how far you have come and the mistakes you've made along the way also. So I suppose on that also, I know in your podcast, and if anyone hasn't heard the Farming for Nature podcast with Fergal Smith, it's on our website, or on iTunes podcast, Farming for Nature. But you mentioned on that about the EOV monitoring scheme. Is that tied into this holistic management? And what is that? What does that mean?
So EOV means ecological outcome verification. So they talk about organic certification, and they say, it's been around for over 50 years, and there's still only 2% or something of, farms in organic certification. So their sense of it is that it's failed. It hasn't worked. It hasn't been widely adopted. So we need to change it, and it has to be they're saying a verification rather than a certification. So they come and they monitor your fields, and it's to me it's a no-brainer. They come out, they monitor each one of your fields. So we had it done this summer. I think we did 22 different fields. They'll split up the field if it's a big field, and they go through 21 different questions, and you get a result at the end. And then the next year they come back and they do it again, and it has to be going up. And if it's going up, great. The land's getting better, so you're getting the tick. And that's, there's no form filling, just the land's getting better, and then you are verified. But if the land's not getting better, it doesn't matter what form you fill out. It has to be getting better. So, and it's so simple. And for me, it was really good. It only came on like this last couple of years, and it was a kind of one of the drawbacks of holistic management is you can have all these plans and you're really caring and, put all this detail and monitoring and being wrong and changing everything. But there was nothing nothing to show that you're doing things right. You weren't getting not that you want a pat on the back, but just to actually see that you're doing things right.
Affirmation.
So then adding this in now really ties in your work. You're getting to see the benefits, and that is really cool. And I think, and the other bit that they're doing, which is good, but it's probably going to take more time, is they're then linking the EOV verification to companies that want regenerative products. They want regenerative food or leather or whatever it is. And that's, because they're doing that in the background, which could really help farmers, I think. So it's very much in its infancy, but I think for me as a farmer, it's just lovely to have someone come around and check all these things that, we essentially should be doing ourselves, and you are kind of doing by osmosis, but they really go through the checklist and you see it's got better, and you're like, cool. Like, that makes you a lot more motivated again to keep that up and keep your plan, being monitored closely because you want to see it get better every year.
Brilliant. Yeah. The other thing is, Fergal, also in your podcast, you mentioned one of your biggest changes on your farm was including grazing animals and the change to biodiversity that made, and what a kind of surprise that was for you nearly. Can you maybe give us some quick win-wins that you had for biodiversity on your farm? Or you can talk about the grazing, like what cattle, how that changed farming for you, because I know you were saying originally that you're essentially a market gardener, but actually bringing in grazing cattle also helped the whole system.
Yeah, market gardening is a never-ending job, and so it's very tricky for me to break out of that enterprise. So that is a lot of my time, but I really wanted to get the animals going. I know all about it. I've read loads. I'm so excited about it. And then the first year we got the new farm, we got 6 cows from a neighbor, and there's a field, the best field on the farm is like a 6-acre field, and it hadn't been grazed for maybe 3 or 4 years, and it had this like real yellow, tinge to it, all thatched, and it wasn't pretty looking. And underneath there was a lot of bare soil. There wasn't much happening, and the 6 cows went around that field 3 times that summer, and that was it. And the next spring, every farmer that went past the field were like asking me could they cut it for hay. The whole field was just, a nice sunny evening, you could just see the whole top of the field was all insects and flies and covered in flowers, and it was just amazing. And all I did is moved 6 cows for 3 or 4 months, and then the holistic management people came the year that it was all yellow, and then they came the next year, and they said the first year there was something like 90% bare ground underneath the yellow thatched grass, and the next year, after just the 6 cows walking around, there was 2% bare ground. So straight away, just by them, like there wasn't a huge amount for them to eat, but they trampled and put all that carbon down. The next year, straight away, the whole thing came back to life. It was just, and I did that, at the end of the day after working for 10 or 12 hours in the market garden, and like moved a wire, and I probably made a far bigger biodiversity shift in the land than all the hours I spent in the market garden. And it just showed me how, our animals are the tools. They can do it far better than us humans. They're designed to live and eat on the land, and it was amazing to watch.
And presumably you're adding compost and fertility to your market garden, so aiding the whole process in general.
Yeah, no, we don't use our animal manure really in our market gardens because we don't house them that much, or very, very little. And ideally in a regenerative system, you want your animals just on the land. That's them putting the fertility down right where it's meant to be. So market garden is a real kind of man-made environment where we take in inputs or nutrients from somewhere else and putting it in this one field. So we don't use their own animals. We're just trying to keep it out on the land.
Just something you said there, and I think it'd probably be of interest to a lot of people, is your cattle are out 12 months of the year?
They will be this year. They were in for a month last year, but yeah. And see, the thing is, like, that one field we started on, that was our best field, and it was in a poor condition. So if you say that was a 10 score, there's fields that we've only got to really last year that were down at like 2. Like, they'd be very, very low grade land. And so now that I'm grazing around, I went around every field this year probably 4 times, 5 times maybe. So each year on year, the grass is getting a bit better and noticeably better. So now I'm getting longer, and I started off with 1 cow and calf, and she was in calf, so I had 3, and then now we have 5 dexters, and then I got another 3 bullocks as well. So I've got 8 cows. I had a bull as well. But so it went up like this, but they're staying out longer, even though they're getting more animals. And we added sheep in as well this year. So there's more animals than we've had before, and they're staying out longer because each year the grass is getting a bit better. So I hope by next year, again, we'll have more animals and we should be able to keep staying out. It's interesting.
You find the breed is important, or?
Yeah, like it's, our land is very poor. We're north facing, West Clare, beside the sea. It's, it's not great land. So yeah, we have dexters, but I got these 3 bullocks as well from a friend, and they're like twice the size, and you can just watch the impact. Like, the dexters are making no impact, whereas the other guys are, seriously, they're not designed for walking around our fields. So it's a little tricky keeping them moving all the time with them in there. Now they won't be around forever because they're bullocks, so they were just helping a friend out really. But yeah, the dexters are phenomenal. They're so small. They're tiptoeing across the land really.
So a massive part of your model, I suppose, is direct sale to customer. You do this through a RECO system. You might just explain to us what that is, or all the other ways that you do directly sell to your community and your.
Yeah. Direct selling is the biggest. I think that's the biggest thing the farmers kind of need to adopt if they want to, make farming their full-time living, because it's all about getting rid of the middleman. The middleman is the only one making money in farming at the moment, in the more kind of conventional system. So we've explored every direct selling model that we can think of really. We started with the CSA, which this year was the first year I didn't do. And it's an amazing model. It really, really is sublime, and it's a lovely relationship you build up with your community. But it actually does exclude quite a few people in your community, because the CSA is quite, we commit to the consumer, and the consumer commits to the farmer. But unfortunately, our culture now is most of society are not going to commit. They are not going to commit to a 12-month contract on paying the farmer because they could be going away or whatever. And, we don't blame them for it. So you end up only getting 10% of your community, 5 to 10%, I reckon, are actually interested in the CSA. And, they're the amazing customers, but they'll also buy from you in whatever way you sell. They don't need it to be a CSA. Whereas your neighbors and people are here for the summer, they're not going to sign up to the CSA. So we've ended up we've always done markets as well, which is a good one for that. There's no commitment at a market. The great one that we've done the last couple of years is the farm shop. The farm shop is lovely because people can come anytime they want, no commitment, they can pick what they want, and there's no work for us. Like, we obviously have to harvest, but we put it up there and we go back to work. It's an honesty box system. And yeah, it really, really works. Now, that only works depending on your location. It depends if you can generate traffic coming to the farm or whatever. But the farm shop, I think, is the most sublime system for simplicity for everyone. And then we do restaurants. We've done them, all our local restaurants. And then the RECO. The RECO is an amazing model created by a guy in Finland. And it went all over Scandinavia the last 5 years, and it's amazing. Like, it's so good, so simple. So it's basically just using Facebook, the producer puts up an advert saying, I have this. Underneath, the consumer writes, I want 2 of those, 3 of those. The producer says, thumbs up. And now that's a legally binding contract. That's a sale. So now you can turn up in any car park anywhere and hand over the goods and take the cash. You can do the money transfer there as long as you've done the pre-order. But if you turned up in the car park and did that without that pre-order, you'd be illegally trading. And that's why with markets, you need to get a trading license and insurance and all that stuff. So markets have all that in the background. Whereas once you have this RICO thing, where RICO means fair consumption in Finnish. That's what the word means. But yeah, once you make that click on Facebook, that's a legally binding contract, and now it's a drop-off point. And it really works. So we did it here the last 2 years in Lahinch and Ennis, and it's great, but to be honest, it hasn't worked amazing because there's a couple of reasons. You really need to have a RICO. It's like a market, essentially. You need to have all the produce. If someone's going to go and order online, and they don't just want to go all the way into town for eggs. There needs to be eggs, milk, cheese, veg, meat, you name it. And then it's like doing a one round at the supermarket. It's the same thing. You get your whole shopping bag and go home. And it's very hard because there's not enough small scale or medium scale, I don't say small scale producers, because small scale, if RICO got busy, which is what we had maybe 10 or 12 small scale producers, and then there's not enough stuff. There isn't enough people, or there isn't enough produce for the people. So we have an issue I find is we've small scale producers, and then we've big producers, and we need more medium producers who can actually supply the local population, which is quite a lot bigger than the small scale, but it's not gone industrial. So we didn't have enough kind of probably producers in that way. And then we also, it is a challenge for our culture. We're not like this, the Dutch or the Germans or the Swedish. We don't turn up on time. We say, yeah, we'll be there and all that kind of stuff. And it's a little bit of commitment again. And I think there's a bit of that culture. Now, maybe if we keep sticking at it, it'll work. And I will go back to it again. We stopped it quite early this year because we just found the farm shop and the markets were just thriving this year. So we didn't need it. But yeah, it's a great system. It just might take a bit of time.
Perfect. Listen, I'm just going to ask a couple of more questions, and then I know there's lots of, like I said, been emailed into me, and also they're starting to come up in chat. But you've been farming for 8 years now. What would you say of the do's and don'ts of someone starting out, in your experience?
That's a big question. It depends. What I always ask, what's the context? What are they starting to do? What's their enterprise they're looking to start? What kind of scale?
I think this question actually came in from someone who was looking at market gardening, to be honest, and kind of starting to go direct to customer. Yeah.
Well, and then it goes again, the context is like, what's your experience? Like, if you have no experience, don't go and try and start a market garden that year on your site. That's probably not going to go very well, and it'll be quite stressful. Now, have a play around year for yourself maybe, but try and do an internship, try and do some learning, try and volunteer somewhere, try and do a day a week with a grower. Really try and get some experience from someone who's already 10 years down the track, because it takes a few years to learn all those mistakes. Is a good one. And I'm not a tech person, but there's so much stuff online. Like, there's so many YouTubes of great people, writing people down. Obviously Richard Perkins would be a person that I would have learned a lot from. He's come here and taught here, and I've done his course online. He has a course online. That kind of stuff is really, really good. The Jean-Martin Fortier, the market gardener in Canada, in Quebec, he's world renowned. There's some really good resources out there, and we're online tonight. We might as well use the tools that we have. So before you dive in, and they say, and it all depends on your cash flow. Like, if you're low on cash and you're going to start a market garden to try and make money, probably a risky move. Whereas if you have even a mundane, standard minimum wage job, it's nearly better to do another year in the minimum wage job and try and save as much money and do some learning, because you'll make far more money on a minimum wage job than you will trying to make money your first year market gardening. Okay. It'll take you 2 or 3 years really to get off the ground.
Okay, and then for the conventional farmers in the crowd, like what piece of advice would you give them and where to start, say, bringing more nature onto their farm? So kind of places that maybe aren't high nature value areas like Clare, but elsewhere.
Yeah, it all, like, it really comes back to context. It depends where you're at, like, what you're willing to do. Like, you might be full of energy and you want to do some tree planting and plant all your hedgerows. Like, I was watching a video or a talk on hedgerows the other night and I got all inspired to start laying some hedges, because all our hedges need to be managed, and you might want to do that for a month, or you might just want to, I don't know, try and back fence your cows while you're grazing. I always am perplexed how simple it is to use electric fences, and just try it. When you're moving, you're strip grazing your animals and you give them a new day, just don't let them go back on the bit they had, a few days ago, because that is the overgrazing. And just keep them moving away from where they were, and just see what happens, and observe. Observe is the big bit. Yeah, and again, the online stuff is very easy. For the grazers, I think, like, I'm so passionate about this guy called Greg Judy in the States. He's amazing to watch, and he's a very different model than Ireland with 1,600 acres that he manages. But yeah, it's just really interesting. He's taking off on like really degraded land and thriving just by moving animals. So, I'm not the expert. I'm really learning this stuff and I'm trying it out. But I'm seeing guys that are 20, 30 years down the line and they have the evidence. So, it depends how much you want to take on, and, play around. Look online that people are already doing it, get a bit inspired by it, and then try it and see what happens. Brilliant. It doesn't mean you have to change your whole farm,
Yeah. So there's a couple of questions here that were emailed into me, so I'll start with them and then we'll move on to the chat box. So one I'm going to pick out is from an Aga Peratsk. What was the main challenge getting the soil ready for your growing, and what methods do you find best in your regenerative practice?
In the market garden, yeah. Getting it going is tricky. We have pigs here because a lot of our land is like real scrubby, so we just put our pigs through quickly. Like the new garden we started here was a classic field, really thick grass, hadn't been grazed for a few years. So the pigs went through, kind of ate all that through, and then we don't dig. So what we do is we just lay down the lines of the width of the beds and then your pathway. So you make your shape of your beds, and then we just lay down huge amounts of manure, like massive amounts. Now, it's not what you will be doing even the next year, but for the very first year, we just put down huge amounts. And you can put down loads of silage and loads of manure and all this stuff, and ideally do it a good bit in advance of the season even, and cover it with a sheet of plastic as well. And you're just getting a massive bank of organic matter basically there. And then the following season, then it comes down to a bit more of a management system. That's like a big kickstart to get going, and it's a bit rich and it can be a bit of an issue, but it gets you going. And then now, we're putting 4 barrows of compost per bed, a 30-meter bed. So you're then going down to a lot less, and we now buy in finished compost. I do use animal manures a bit. I let them break down a lot more, and if I want something high fertility for a crop, I'll put down the animal manures and then the compost on top. The compost is unreal. It's weed free, really fine. It's been sieved. It's really easy to work with. It's great for direct sowing, but you got to pay for it. And if you're trying to build your beds with that stuff, it's a lot of stuff. Now, if you're willing to pay for it, I just buy the compost in because it's brilliant. The key with the compost, though, when it arrives, it's really sterile because it's been at 60 degrees for a month, and it's, comes in steaming hot sometimes, and that's not great. And it's like hydrophobic. You can barely get it wet, and that's a real issue as well. So what I'm doing now is trying to get it as early as I can. Like I got a load there before Christmas, and and now I have a load that's a little bit left from last summer, and now it's been sitting there since the summer. It is full of life. Like it is teeming. Like I was just out there looking at it, and it's just covered in worms. Where when it arrives, it's just completely sterile. But I would take the sterile compost over moving animal manures and having slugs, and trying to direct sow, and and tilling and all that stuff. So yeah, you can add your biology with your own animal manures that you mind, and you can put that in with the compost on top. But it's amazing. It's having a living weed suppressor. It's without having to use plastic.
Sorry, did you say you get it in from Finland?
No, we get it in from Limerick.
Oh, Limerick. Sorry, I thought you said Finland. That's why I was confused. Okay.
No.
Yeah.
Newcastle West.
Okay, bit different. Yeah. Okay, here's another question, Paddy Blake. How would you get rid of buttercups and organic grass and in tillage? The pH is 6.9, soil's reasonable balance, but there's the sulfur and zinc is a bit low. Would gypsum help with the tightness in the soil? If you don't know the answer, that's fine as well.
I wouldn't know the ins and outs of the kind of all the amendments that people can make. Like, is this for horticulture or is this for tillage?
It sounds like, well, he's talking about in a tillage field, tillage and grass. Yeah,
that wouldn't be my genre.
Area.
In the market garden, like, just what we do is we have the pathways and the beds, and they're fixed, and it's an input system. Like, there's no getting away from it. Now, there's loads of different systems of market gardening. This is just the one we use because we don't till. But we put down a big thick layer of wood chips in the pathways, so we don't have any weeds on the paths. And then we put on all this compost on the top, so we don't have any weeds on the top. And then at the end of the season, I might use cover crops sometimes, but actually more often than not, we grow quite late, and then I just cover up with plastic. And I don't like using plastic, but it really works. So it just keep it on for at least 3 months if you can, or 4, and then you peel it back and there's no real weeds there. You might get a few docks and a few things coming through and you dig them out. But because we're not tilling, and we broad fork, that big 2-handle fork, it's that is our aerator. So we run that through the beds first, and then we put on very generous amounts of compost. That it's you're basically just adding a beautiful finished bed every year. So even if you had a problem the year before, the next year, from covering it, putting down the wood chips, putting down the compost, you kind of don't like, it's very input based. You're not I have a dream in the longer term of doing field scale horticulture in a slightly, it's very hard to do in this climate, but some version of a no-till field scale, and that is a lot more exciting in a way, because you could grow a lot of, because the no-till system we do, the no-dig system we make here, you don't really grow your staples in that. You don't grow your spuds and your turnips because they're too low value for the amount of compost you're investing and the amount of labor you're investing. You're not going to put in crops that don't make you much money, and they take more space. So otherwise you're going to be making beds all day long, and it's it's a huge amount of labor. So, but going down the more field scale road of growing row crops, your more staple veg, I have those ideas. I can't say any of them because I haven't done any of them. So, but I have those ideas where we could, bring in a little bit more closer to what we're doing with the market garden into field scale. Because then you'd have a full no-dig market garden. That's all the high-value crops on the small scale, and then you could have field scale for your staples. But yeah, it's down the line.
Perfect. I have lots of questions here, Fergal, on kind of Rico and Facebook and software, but I will not go into that. People can look it up for themselves if that's okay. Let's just focus on farming for nature as well. But I have one here from Robert Cluson. Can you share management practices that you have changed based on the monitoring data I suppose you've acquired? Maybe could you share one or two management practices that you have changed based on your monitoring data?
Like I can get into loads of little details, but basically, like I started with a few cows here, and our land is rough, you know, like it's been over rested, it's poor land. So I integrated sheep, and they were way better together. So we have them all together in one flood, as we call it, and yeah, it's great because they're going for all the slightly undesirables that the cows don't want, and that really is, you know, it's better for the pasture, and it's adding, you know, a more diversity on the land, and another, in the end, another product, you know, for the farm. So that's been really nice to see. And the big thing that I'm really proud of, by the way, that I show off to everyone is that I keep the sheep in with the cows on one single electric wire. And that was my mission. I got them this summer, and I said, if I can't train them to one single wire, they're not staying. So I spent quite a long time, not a huge amount of time, but we worked on it. We started with them in the shed, and these sheep now have never seen electric wire in their lives. They've only been in walls and barbed wire. So I had them in the shed first, put up a few lines of wire, got them a few zaps, and then they went outside on three lines, then down to 2 lines. And then we kept them on 2 lines and put them in with the cows, and that was fine. And then we're on 1 line.
It's great, actually. Yeah, the kind of the memory of the bank there.
Yeah.
Just to clarify, someone actually clarified for me that it was finished compost, not finish. Yeah, sorry. This is from a Jason Kiernan. What budget would you need to set up from scratch to grow produce? And then do you find your demand is greater than you can supply at present?
What was the first question?
Oh yeah, what budget would you recommend to set up from scratch to start growing produce? Like, i.e. tunnels, compost, manure? Yeah. It's a big question.
It is. It depends what scale you want to go in at. You know, I can guess that you want to, if it's a 1 acre market garden, you know, you kind of want to have 20-30 grand, you know, to invest straight away. You know, to invest in tunnels, to invest in tools, to invest in compost, and to have extra for investing in, you know, your delivery van, whatever. Like, all that stuff needs to be, you can't be shy on that at the beginning, otherwise you're very slow to get off the ground. Depends how you want to do it. Like, you could do it very organically. People do put up 1 tunnel, grow on that'll pay for that year. You have enough money to put up 2 tunnels. You know, you can do it like step by step. It depends which way you want to go, you know, how fast you want to move. But if you want to get up to making a kind of a bit of a living income, yeah, you want to have I would say 20 or 30 grand to spend on infrastructure to start. You know, a packing shed. You need a packing shed straight away of some kind. So that's, you know, if you build anything, it's never less than like 5 grand, like 10 grand probably. So it's hard once you build something to try not to spend money. So it's one of those conundrums.
And is your demand at the moment greater than
we're definitely over demand. Yeah. We found that this year, which is great. So it's a nice position to be in, growing. Like, we were oversupplied, I'd say, the last few years. And now with COVID this year, it turned around very quickly. So yeah, now we're trying to catch up to that.
Okay. And Nora Wheatley has asked, do you know of any methods to plant native hedgerows or wild bird cover without using the use of glyphosate? That's probably in relation to what the department recommend in terms of wild bird cover. Don't know if you do that in your area.
I have no idea. I just plant trees.
Yeah.
I wouldn't. Now, like, I'll tell you a bit of management we do with our trees, because we do have a lot of hedgerow planting done, and they do get swamped by brambles and grasses in those first couple of years. And what I found is, because I do the animals on daily moves, or in the early summer, sometimes twice daily. Now, I actually don't do it in the summer, actually. No. It's in the winter. But I always do daily moves year round. It's nearly always daily moves. So in the wintertime, once the leaves are gone off the trees, I actually let them in around the trees, and they're only there for 24 hours or less, and there's no leaves there, so they're not eating the trees, and they're only little whips, so they just walk by them and they bend and they whatever. And if there's 100 trees and one or two got damaged at most, so I've seen very little damage. And then it's actually a nice little winter stockpile of grass that I have, and it cleans all around the trees, and the trees are totally clean going into the spring. And that's been really nice. I like that the last few years.
Okay, interesting. How are you treating your cattle and sheep for worms and fluke, or are you?
I'm not.
You're not. And is it a problem?
God, no.
No.
It's so, like, I'm really, I don't want to be in any way as if I know anything, but it seems so simple to me. Is just keep them moving. They're never in the same pasture for more than a day, so they're never standing over their own manure. They're always walking into tall grass. That's a big thing. So they're grazing, their mouths are above the grass, and it's been 40, 50, 60 days since the last time they were there. So all the manure that was there is now gone. And yeah, and I'm really just copying the likes of Greg Judy and doing exactly what he's doing. And yeah, they're so healthy. They're really, really healthy, and there don't seem to be any problems. And I'm always looking. I'm really out there looking every day to try and monitor. Okay, I don't know that much and what should go wrong, but they just seem to be thriving all the time.
Yeah. And on that, things like, I suppose, calving and stuff, do you have many vet bills? Do you find that the cattle
No, I
are
did
outside?
have messed up this year. I had a vet have to do a C-section this year because my own, this is me being totally naive, but I had a bull last year and with my two cows, and one of the cows had a calf, and the calf was 8 months old. I didn't think anything about it. The calf got pregnant. So she was 18 months old there this autumn, and gets even worse that she's a dwarf Dexter.
Okay.
So Dexters have a gene that I don't know how one in how many, but very not that often happens. But you can have dwarf Dexters. So she's this tiny miniature 18-month-old Dexter trying to have a regular sized Dexter calf.
Oh.
Yeah, so it didn't. We tried, but it wasn't. We didn't try for very long, and we were like, "Yeah, this is not going to work out."
Yeah.
The nice thing about it is the vet was obviously cutting open the cow, and she said the condition of the cow was amazing. She was like, "Wow, this cow is looking really healthy." I was like, "Cool. Well, that was nice to see from the inside."
Yeah. It's not something you see often. Yeah.
No, and like it wasn't nice, but it was a great learning for me in all that stuff. I won't be doing that again.
Yeah.
And what happened was the calf came out and couldn't stand up because it had been so squashed inside.
Interesting.
So its legs were all floppy for like 3 days. So I had to milk the cow and bottle feed the calf. And that was an amazing experience because I now got to handle this cow a lot more than I normally would have, and the calf. So that now I'm really, really, close to the two of them. I ended up getting, from milking the cow in the crush to I ended up milking the cow just standing in the shed, just standing there, which was a lovely experience to get that, connection. And so it wasn't all bad anyway.
Yeah, interesting. And Emma Fisher has asked, what kind of consideration do you give to pollinators in your land management?
Yeah, we have, I don't know, what is it now? I think we have 5 new hives, and we had 3, so we have 8 hives, I think, now here. And we barely take any honey at all. Like, sometimes we take a little bit, but it's really just trying to have hives of bees around. And then we plant loads of flowers. We have one permanent kind of, some people call them beetle banks, or like a perennial system, basically in the center of the market garden that's always just got herbs and flowers going to seed and stuff like that. And then on the ends of our beds, nearly all our beds, we always plant marigolds, and yeah, my wife plants loads of flowers, and we put them all over the place. So yeah, it's and this year for the first time I let 1,000 kale plants go to seed, and that was amazing. Like they were 6-7 foot tall, and geez, I never heard the sound like it. You could stand in the middle there and you could barely hear anything. It was so loud with the bees. That was cool. So I might let some more. It's really not a market gardener's thing to do, is let things go to seed like that. yeah, I kind of just took the break off this, the accelerator off this year, and I wasn't doing the CSA, and yeah, I just let it go, and it was amazing. It was nice to do it.
It's great. Yeah, and like you say, nice to do it, see if you can improve on it next year or include it again.
I did it because I was saving seed for seed savers, so I got a lot of seed out of it. It wasn't totally all fun and games as well.
Okay.
Got a pile of seed back here.
Excellent. Nice banner the other side of your Farming for Nature ambassador. Yeah.
I was outside and I saw it, so I said I'd bring it in.
Just to prove. Yeah, no, great. Conor McCauley has asked, Fergal, is it important to you to live on your land, and what advice would you give to anyone trying to find a new property of land, i.e. 5 to 10 acres? Is it a case of monitoring real estate websites or getting out and speaking to landowners?
Obviously look online for sure, and it depends where you're willing to live. Like if you're just looking for a site, sure, then you can look at the property websites for the country, and you find the best tick the box site with the south facing slope and all the the right things. If you don't have a connection to a place, but for me, I had a connection to this area, so that's trickier. So then land doesn't go for sale really where you want it to often. So then you're just asking neighbors, and that's a longer game, but that's, I would say, the best way is put the word out, say and start small. Say you're looking for 2 acres, and get going on that, and then once people see that you kind of proved yourselves and you're looking for more, you might get lucky a bit more. And I always think start small and prove what you're about, and then people will kind of help you more as well.
And people are doing leases as well. They might lease out their land for.
We don't have a great lease culture here. I wish we did, because I definitely would love to lease land for grazing, but it's very hard to go out and buy more land. Like buying land is, we're still 150 grand in debt still from our land, so it takes a long time to pay off land. So leasing would be a great way to get started if you can get lease agreements.
Okay, Craig Holmes has asked, what is a savoury hub? Can you explain it to us?
So Alan Savory is an amazing man that I would definitely recommend people go and look up if you haven't heard of him. And I know he won some award or something, but basically I think he got funding or something anyway, but he started the Savory Institute, which is a worldwide global network. And then they have savory hubs in each kind of country or continent, and then there's a UK and Ireland savory hub with Sheila and Christopher, and they're based in the UK, and they come over here each year usually, and we're talking about becoming a savory hub for them at some point. So it is.
Okay, great. Seamus Bradley has asked, does land that is used for grazing also get used for growing vegetables at any stage? Is there rotation on it, or are they separate?
No, the market garden is fixed. They're fixed. I put the turkeys through our market garden this winter, but then the livestock wouldn't be coming in here. Now this is where the field scale stuff could get interesting. This is where I want to experiment with, but not in the market garden now anyway.
Okay. Cormac Kelly has asked, do you have any plans to coppice the woodland you've planted for biodiversity encouragement and timber use?
Yeah, like again, I'm not an expert, and I'm not saying I know exactly what I want to do in lots of ways. It'll be a monitoring system. Like the alleyways I've created in one of the fields that I think I'll be pollarding, and then feeding the branches to the livestock as they're going through, just for a bit more of a diverse diet. I think that's one plan I'll have. There's not really much woodland here. See, a lot of it is just hedgerows and like really thick banks of trees on the westerly edges. So I wouldn't really want to be shortening them. Like most of the trees we've planted are for wind protection. So we're probably going to want to keep all our wind protection, because that's probably our biggest limiting factor here is the relentless winds. So, but the alleyways I'll probably be pollarding, I'd say.
Okay. Luke Cape has asked, how do pigs work in your system? Do you bring in piglets each year, or do you breed? And have you had much success in improving grassland this way?
Our system is 3 old pigs. They're 7 or 8 now. I have them since day one. And basically everywhere we have acquired has been completely neglected and overgrown. Like the very first site that I started on was 5 feet high in brambles, and you couldn't even walk into the field. So that's where I got the pigs. And then yeah, everywhere has been really overgrown. 17 acres hadn't been looked at for about 15 years. And same here, the farm that we got 4 years ago was very neglected. So they're just going through areas of like real thick, dense rushes and brambles, like places you can barely walk into. And then we fence them in generally into a size paddock that they last about a month. Depends on the weather. And they basically just trash the place. Like it ain't pretty. Like there's nothing that nice about it. You're creating a lot of bare soil, but we don't have machinery, and a lot of our land is wet as well, so you wouldn't really get machinery in there. So they rip the place up to pieces, and then you've got a blank canvas to decide on what you're going to do with it. So some places will plant with trees if it's really wet, or you're not going to come back for grass, or if it is, a lot of it sometimes is just brambles, and they can rip them out, and yeah, you've got to keep on top of them. But then yeah, you just have to give it a huge rest. Then you might have to give it 9 months, a year before you put livestock in grazing on it. But it's a biological way of kickstarting the ecosystem back to, you're using a tool to get it where you want. We want to have more grass, or we want to plant, or we're speeding up succession. Like the brambles is the start of the succession to go to trees, but it takes a lot longer, and we want it to be a bit more organized on how we want the trees. So we rip up all the rushes and brambles, and then we plant the lines of trees. So it's kind of, we decide on what we want to do. But yeah, they've been doing great. They're pretty much at the end of the farm in the sense of clearing everywhere I need cleared. So yeah, I'm looking for anyone who needs pigs to rehome them, because they've done a great job, and I'd like them to go to somewhere else now.
Okay, fair enough. Aina Cavan has asked, have you looked into the idea of using biochar to enhance your soil at all?
I have thought about it. Like, because we've been still in our early years, like all that stuff really is interesting, but it's like there's this 80-20 rule in getting things done, and putting out compost and making more beds is going to make us a lot more produce and money and kickstart the project than spending loads of time on all these things. I do a little bit of making comfrey teas and nettle teas and things like that, because they're really good for tomatoes and cucumbers. But bar that, yeah, that's the kind of stuff I'd love to get into. But we're clearing land, planting trees, putting in fences, all these basic things, building tunnels, building sheds. It's all this kind of first stuff. Like this container I'm sitting in here was only here 3 or 4 months ago. Like all these things are all still early days, and yeah, I love the idea of biochar. It's definitely a really good thing to do. But when you're buying in the compost, that's also quite a big expense, and it kind of solves a lot of your problems. It works. It's really good. It's in some ways it's cheating, and it's very easy. Like a big lorry turns up and drops black gold on the ground, and off we go. Whereas if we're a lot more resilient on our own 2 feet, we could be making compost and teas and biochar, and that would be great. But I'm trying to do a few too many things at once, probably, and I want to kickstart it.
And actually on that, you have a lot of feathers in your cap, and there's a lot of aspects to your business, different produce and stuff. Do you find that makes your business more resilient, or is it very labor intensive? Or, if people are looking at this, is it a good or a bad thing? What do you think?
Yeah, well, I like it. I like the kind of all the different things going on. It kind of mimics the farm. Like there's some parts of the farm have good land, some parts aren't good land, and that's where there's trees. So it kind of all suits the environment. The big thing is your context again. It's like we don't have a big population, so if we had a city nearby, we could just concentrate on 1 or 2 enterprises, or one enterprise, and go for that, and you'd sell it all. But if we have too much quantity of one thing in a rural area, you're not going to sell it all, and then you're driving off to the cities. And we really try not to get sucked into driving off the farm. So I think having a diverse range of things allows, they say it's better to have 10 customers, spending €1,000 than 100 customers spending €100. So that's a lot more. And because we started with the CSA, we have some really good customers who are really like been with us since the beginning, and everything that we produce, like when we did turkeys last year was the first year, and then this year, they all believe in us. They're all buying our veg all year long, so they totally understand that it's going to be a high quality bird, and they support us there. So yeah, I think it's nice. It creates more diversity for the farm, and more more interest and more kind of life going on as well. So yeah, I think diversity is key. I think it really is. We know that in nature anyway. So if you can manage it, it's a little bit complex. But then yeah, what if you have a drought and nothing grows or something, and you have to rely on your eggs or whatever else you have. So I think, yeah, I was going to mention a few different people who are way further down the line than me, but it's like the likes of Gabe Brown and Greg Judy and Joel Salatin. Those three guys for me are kind of heroes in the regenerative farming world, because they all were pretty much broke. Like every one of them were bankrupt. Like Gabe Brown's story is phenomenal, and and they were conventional. They were conventional farmers doing it the conventional way, and just going broke, completely gone broke. And they couldn't, like Gabe Brown couldn't afford to buy the fertilizer to feed his crops, and that's what forced him to be a regenerative farmer, because he had to live without. But he said the reason why he survived is because he wasn't just arable stuff. He had a beef enterprise that he wasn't going broke on, and because he had 3 years or 4 years of crop failures, but his animal enterprises got him through it. And that was a really good example. Like he just about survived because he had another enterprise. So like, there's living examples of people who have had the struggles, and they've got the t-shirt kind of thing, and they can tell you what it takes to get through. Like we're getting the t-shirt, but haven't got it yet. But it's fascinating to watch these guys who are gone broke, and made all the mistakes, or did what was told of them by the kind of industry, and they just said it wasn't working, and they had to reinvent the wheel. And now these are the regenerative farmers that we're learning from, but they weren't regenerative farmers. They didn't go into farming as regenerative farmers. They had to figure it out. And Greg Judy talks about, he has sheep and he sells guard dogs as well. But he says as well, that's all. He really goes on about the diversifying your enterprises. It's key, because what if you have a problem in one? It's definitely worth it. Like I'd love to start milking the Dexters at some point, just a little micro dairy, because it's lovely. Like it's the problem with the animal enterprises that I'm sure people know, but you can't really have a proper animal enterprise until you have lots of acres. 60 acres of land isn't really enough land to make a living as an animal enterprise. So we have to diversify. We have to have an orchard and the garden and all these other things, because 10 cows or whatever isn't going to be an income. So, but 10 milking cows, and you're selling the milk directly at whatever €2.50 or €3, then it could be a bit more of a worthwhile enterprise. But it's really key. And it's, I love the Greg Judy kind of model, but you're not going to get 1,600 acres in Ireland very easy. Like, so it's kind of, you have to diversify if you want to survive, I think.
Okay, that's really interesting. Actually, my last and final question was, where would you get advice and support? And you've mentioned those three leading farmers. How about in Ireland? Is there anywhere that you would kind of suggest that people? Is there anything a bit more local that you would just?
You just like we've had Jim on here, Cronin, for the market gardening stuff. He'd be a total guru for that. I don't know how many people like bar Jim that are really teaching it, and want to get have people involved. Like I know Clive Bright has been doing amazing stuff for years, but you know, they're obviously busy farmers as well, trying to make a living. So I don't know how much they have time to do it. But what I was going to say is, with being able to do things online, and I'm doing at the moment, is the Oxford Real Farming Conference is on, and it's only £20, and it's just there, like, and it's a whole range of topics to go through. And then the Biofarm that was on, you know, back in November, like, that is amazing stuff, like at our fingertips, that you can have all that knowledge that people have been building up for, you know, years and years, and you can just sit there at home and hear it all. So yeah, I think there's great stuff between just those two conferences, and then yeah, through the Farm for Nature, and you know, all the different people that are going through here. Like we are, I think the great thing is at the moment is, I think we have come to a place of a little bit of an agreement on a few basics things of, you know, it's better to farm for nature because that will, you know, that will last. I think we've agreed that, and integrating trees is good, and you know, yeah, there's enough of the things there. Now the hard bit is, how do we get people implementing it and helping them implement it? So the more places you can learn that are already doing it, it'll just give you a bit more kind of confidence. And unfortunately, yeah, there isn't that many people, you know, that far down the track in this neck of the woods. So yeah, I end up watching different places abroad, but it is happening, you know, like the wheel is turning that direction, and I think there's a fairly big agreement from, you know, scientists, farmers, you name it, kind of like, yeah, the integration of mixed swords and different, you know, more hardy breeds. You know, the numbers are all starting to stack up. It's just going to take a bit more time for that to actually, what that looks like on the ground. Yeah.
No, that's fair enough. Listen, I won't keep you any longer, Fergal, because you've been really generous with sharing your knowledge, but also well done on everything that you've achieved in such a short amount of time. And I love the idea that you're always looking to kind of to monitor, to look at what works, what doesn't work, and obviously bringing in your local community as well. And for those of you who don't know, there's the Moy Hill Community Farm have a lovely website. You can look up there. I mean, out of COVID times, there's educational courses, there's different farm walks. Farming for Nature have held walks there, and hopefully will do again in the future. But thank you so much, Fergal, for sharing everything with us. Fergal has a lovely podcast with us on Farming for Nature. And also, I suppose another area that people can find Fergal is through all the usual social media outlets and stuff. But just in terms of Farming for Nature, next week we have Jane Shackleton join us from County Cavan, who is a farmer, a sheep and beef farmer and does a lot of agroforestry. So do register through farmingfornature.ie. And if you have any questions, like a lot of the questions that are coming up tonight, actually there's the Farming for Nature forum online we now have, and it's a great way of asking questions to other farmers as well. And you know, farmers can reply and, you know, engage with each other, and it's a safe space to do that. So that's the forum on our Farming for Nature. Fergal, thank you so much. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule. And yeah, and we look forward to visiting your farm again soon. So thanks for taking the time, and lots of people are very grateful for the time that you've given us. So we'll see you again soon.
We will. Have a good year, lad.
Okay, take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.